Lewis Hamilton has just erupted after shocking new evidence from Las Vegas revealed how badly Ferrari misjudged his entire weekend. Data from the event shows that his car never entered its correct performance window, and every decision made around him made the situation even worse. At the same time, the FIA uncovered a second scandal by disqualifying both McLarens after microscopic floor measurements that changed the championship overnight. Stay right here because these two storylines together expose the truth behind Hamilton's frustration and the mistakes that could shape the final two races of the season. The Las Vegas weekend turned into a collapse for Hamilton the moment qualifying began because the conditions combined with Ferrari's preparation errors created a scenario no top driver could escape. The wet track offered extremely low grip, and the surface temperature continued to drop as the session progressed. Ferrari failed to generate the tire warmth needed for Hamilton to attack the lap with confidence. Each corner felt disconnected from the next as the car slid at turn entry and refused to stabilize at the exit. When the flag fell, Hamilton found himself 20th and facing a race that would demand a comeback through 19 cars on a track that punishes even the smallest misjudgment. As the lights illuminated the Las Vegas Strip at race start, Hamilton confronted a reality he had never expected in his first season with Ferrari. He began at the very back on a circuit where tire temperature and clean air determine who can move forward and who remains trapped. The cold night air made the early laps chaotic, and every attempt to generate heat in the tires forced him to fight the car rather than guide it. Turbulence from the midfield made the Ferrari unpredictable and removed the precision he relied on during braking. He needed temperature to build performance, but every car ahead took that opportunity away. The opening phase became a complex balance between risk and survival. Hamilton had the skill to overtake, but lacked the mechanical grip needed to trust the car in close wheel-to-wheel action. The tires oscillated between too cold and too hot depending on how the traffic compressed around him. Each time he gained a position, the tires cooled again when he rejoined the aerodynamic wash of the next group. Ferrari's tire preparation failures in qualifying created a chain reaction that spread into the first 20 laps and shaped every decision Hamilton made behind the wheel. Recovery was possible, but momentum refused to settle. Ferrari attempted to stabilize the situation through strategy. They placed Hamilton on a long first stint on medium tires in the hope that the track would evolve enough for his pace to rise naturally. The plan made sense in theory, but the cold Las Vegas surface did not deliver the expected improvement. Instead, Hamilton spent the early phase trapped behind slower cars that forced him to manage temperatures constantly. The report shows that tire warm-up remained one of his largest limitations throughout this section of the race. Without the correct balance and grip, he could not unlock the race pace that Ferrari believed the car carried. When Hamilton switched to the hard compound tire, he faced the same limitation at a critical moment. Hard tires require more energy to reach peak performance, and the circuit conditions prevented that process from ever completing smoothly. Through his radio messages, he explained that the front axle lacked the precision required for deep braking, and the rear could not maintain traction through the slow corners. These problems highlighted how far the Ferrari was operating from its ideal window. Even when the tires eventually warmed, the lost time during the transition phase kept him too far from the cars ahead to challenge for stronger points. The closing laps offered a clear illustration of the entire weekend. Hamilton had gained 10 positions, which under normal circumstances would indicate a strong recovery drive. Yet the final result of 10th showed how severely the early errors shaped the event. He crossed the line only 8 seconds behind 9th place, a gap small enough to prove that a clean qualifying session would have given him an entirely different race. The contrast with Leclerc, who finished 6th after a stable run, confirmed that Hamilton's challenge came from preparation, temperature issues, and traffic rather than driving performance. The Las Vegas Grand Prix became the clearest example of how a single mistake at the start of the weekend can determine everything that follows. Hamilton's Las Vegas weekend fell apart the moment qualifying began because the conditions exposed Ferrari's inability to generate the tire warmth required for competitive pace. The report makes it clear that he struggled for grip from his very first attempt. The surface was cold, the track offered little adhesion, and the SF25 never entered a stable balance window. Each corner demanded more temperature than the tires could provide, and Hamilton was forced to fight the car in every braking zone. As the session continued, the performance gap widened, and Ferrari could not respond. When the first qualifying phase ended, Hamilton was classified 20th, a position that forced him into a recovery mission that dictated the rest of his weekend. The scale of the problem became even clearer on race day. Starting 20th on a street circuit with narrow margins and limited grip placed Hamilton in an environment where overtaking required tire performance he simply did not have. The early laps became a test of survival as he navigated through turbulent air generated by the midfield pack. The Ferrari lost front-end precision each time he approached another car, and the tires cooled rapidly whenever he was forced to lift through the corners. This made it impossible for him to build the momentum required to execute decisive moves, and the car remained in a compromised performance state far longer than Ferrari anticipated. The report shows that Hamilton did extract the maximum possible performance during the early phases. Despite the lack of grip and constant instability, he still gained positions through disciplined decision-making. However, the time lost in the first half of the race created a gap that the car could not overcome. While Leclerc used clean air to warm tires and build rhythm, Hamilton remained locked behind slower cars. Every lap in traffic increased degradation and reduced the aerodynamic efficiency the Ferrari requires to compete with the leading midfield teams. Even when Hamilton found space, the tires did not remain in the ideal temperature window long enough to sustain competitive pace. The timing data within the report highlights how heavily qualifying shaped the final classification. Hamilton crossed the finish line only 8 seconds behind 9th place after gaining 10 positions across the race. That margin reveals how much was lost by starting last rather than inside the top 10. The difference in airflow, clean track, and tire behavior shaped the two Ferrari drivers' races more than raw performance. Leclerc's 6th place finish did not represent a dramatically faster car, but a dramatically cleaner race. In contrast, Hamilton's 10th place reflected the reality of driving a car that could not achieve stable temperature or balance in the phases that mattered most. The gap to the race winner further illustrates the effect of Ferrari's qualifying errors. Hamilton finished 59.369 seconds behind Max Verstappen, yet the report clarifies that this gap was created not by inherent pace, but by the cumulative time lost navigating the midfield. Every defensive move from the cars ahead forced Hamilton to slow the entry speed into corners and inhibited the Ferrari's ability to maintain tire energy. This compounded the tire warm-up issues that defined his weekend. As a result, the SF25 never had the chance to demonstrate the race pace it displayed in cleaner conditions. By the time the race ended, Hamilton knew he had extracted the maximum possible result. Ferrari's execution on Saturday placed him into an environment that made progress slow and costly. The car's sensitivity to temperature, the instability in turbulent air, and the lack of initial grip all combined into a performance ceiling he could not break. The report supports Hamilton's assessment that 10th was the highest achievable position given the circumstances. Las Vegas became the clearest demonstration of how one failed qualifying session can define an entire weekend, and why Hamilton left the circuit deeply frustrated with Ferrari's preparation and execution. Ferrari entered the Las Vegas weekend aware that tire temperature would dictate performance, yet the extent of the cold conditions exposed a deeper structural weakness within the SF25. The report confirms that Hamilton struggled from the very first lap of qualifying because the car could not generate or retain the heat required to stabilize the front axle. The tires remained too cold to support aggressive turn-in, and this produced persistent understeer that destroyed any attempt at building a competitive lap. The conditions amplified a limitation that Ferrari had faced throughout the year, and Hamilton found himself unable to push with confidence as the session slipped away. Ferrari's strategy during the race was shaped by the information they gathered on Friday. They attempted a long opening stint on medium tires, believing that track evolution would gradually increase grip and allow Hamilton to rise through the field. However, the cold Las Vegas surface never delivered that improvement. The report shows that Hamilton spent the opening phase trapped behind slower cars while fighting turbulent air that repeatedly stripped temperature from his tires. Each time he closed in on a rival, the aerodynamic wash destabilized the car and forced him to protect the tires instead of attacking. This created a cycle where progress was possible but never sustainable. The switch to the hard compound tire revealed another weakness within the SF25. Hard tires require more energy to reach peak performance, and the cold conditions increased that demand further. Hamilton reported through the radio that the front axle lacked the precision he needed to commit to the aggressive braking zones, and that the rear lacked enough traction to support acceleration out of the slow corners. These issues prevented him from launching attacks on the cars ahead and forced him to manage the tire surface rather than extract maximum performance. The Ferrari simply refused to enter the narrow temperature window that allows it to perform at its peak. The aerodynamic behavior of the car under turbulent air amplified these tire issues dramatically. Hamilton spent much of the race behind a long midfield train where the airflow became unpredictable. The report emphasizes that he lost stability whenever he moved closer to another car because the front wing could not generate sufficient load in dirty air. This forced him into a conservative approach that further delayed tire warm-up. Without front-end grip, he could not lean on the car, and without traction, he could not accelerate cleanly. Every attempted move became a calculation between risk and necessity. Las Vegas offered little margin for error, and Hamilton had no opportunity to gamble. Ferrari's race plan lacked the flexibility required to counter these conditions. The conservative one-stop approach protected track position, but removed the possibility of using a fresh tire to break through the midfield. The report confirms that the car's balance issues persisted until the later laps when the tires eventually settled. By then, the gap to the points-paying positions had already stabilized. Hamilton's recovery was strong relative to his starting position, but the strategy limited his ceiling. The decision to prioritize stability rather than aggression reflected Ferrari's expectation that Hamilton would not be able to keep tire temperatures alive if they introduced more pit stops.